Welcome to the London Horror Movie Club. I'm horror writer Lauren Jane Barnett.
And I'm Chris Sapikowski, Lauren's older brother, and I've been watching horror movies since I was 8.
Join us as we talk about the wild, weird, and wonderful horror films set in England's eerie capital.
Welcome back, horror fans, to the London Horror Movie Club October Spectacular. This week, Chris and I are joined by the creator of Mycho Entertainment, which is celebrating 20 years this year. And frequent listeners will be very familiar with some of the Mychoverse slashers, like Pandemonium, which we often talk about, the Slasherhouse trilogy, and of course things like Horoscopes and Thorn. We've had a chance to talk to a lot of actors in these films, and now we get to speak to the master himself. So welcome, MJ Dixon.
Hello. Wow, that I wasn't expecting such a bombastic introduction.
I actually had to narrow it down because, of course, Tony gave me the poster for Slasherhouse 3,
right.
and I was trying to figure out how to juggle everything. Excellent. Well, thank you again for being with us. And I wanted to start by saying congratulations. 20 years of making indie movies is incredible. How did you start out in this crazy industry?
I don't really know, to be honest. I think early on, like when I was like 5 or 6 years old, like the idea that you could like do a job that didn't feel like a job seemed really appealing to me. But also I didn't like history enough to be a paleontologist. I like dinosaurs, but I didn't want to study all like Romans and that. So I was like, okay, maybe like making films sounds like a good thing. But when I was a kid, that was really for rich people who like had film cameras and things like that. And so it didn't seem particularly realistic. And so I decided I was just going to be a horror novelist. But it was just one of those things where every time I was writing something, I thought, I hope this gets turned into a movie one day, and then when I just left school, and like some local guy I knew was like making a film in the woods near us. And he said, oh, to me and my friend, oh, do you want to come down and be in it? And we were like, yeah, sure. And it was like shot on a camcorder, kind of a lot of the lines were like made up on the spot and stuff. And I was like, oh, right. So like anyone can do this, can they? Like, right. Oh, cool. And so I'd gone off to college to be like a web designer. And I'd done that for about a year. I got offered like quite a nicely paid job down near London, to do that. And I just thought to myself, like, I don't think I want to do this. What I'd really like to do is go make some films. And so I found out that there was like a college course close, about half an hour from my house, that would give you like an hour a week with these big TV cameras. But the rest of the week you had to study like news, like how newspapers, manipulate audiences, and, genre study, and, graphic design for magazines and stuff. So I'd spend all my time just writing down ideas that I was going to cram into this 1 hour we got on a Wednesday morning to like, and I just started kind of making stuff, and I enjoyed it. And I realized that was really what I wanted to do. And so I just spent the next few years kind of trying to make my own stuff. I spent a lot of time kind of trying to help other people get their stuff off the ground more than anything, working on other people's things. But that came with like its own problems. And eventually I found that the situation I put myself in wasn't particularly like conducive with like making stuff. It was really there to help other people make stuff, but not to do your own thing. And so I kind of thought, okay, I'll do it on my own. So I think I was about 21 at the time, and I just packed up all my stuff and moved to the middle of the country, to a university that had like stores access with like some nice cameras. And I just spent the next 3 or 4 years just making movies with all their fancy equipment. And Mycho was kind of born from that.
Very cool. Why horror? Like you said, you had mentioned you started with the horror novelist, but what kind of brought you down that road?
I mean, I've always liked horror stuff. I was a big fan of Masters of the Universe when I was like very, very young. And there's like a whole load of like crazy monsters and stuff in that they were always like my favorite characters from that kind of thing. And then yeah, I think when I was I always kind of liked weird, spooky stuff anyway. I think, but when I was 11, I remember being really ill, and my mum said, "Oh, I taped a film off the telly last night," and I was like, "All right." She went, "It might be too scary for you, though," and I thought, "Oh, I'll have a look." And it was John Carpenter's Halloween, and I really knew nothing about it whatsoever. And it was like I've never been so tired in my life, but at the same time, was like, oh, I just really want to do this to other people, like, you know. And then so I just started like we had like an old video cabinet that closed up, and so I'd put like a videotape on long play, so I'd get about 6 hours out of it, and I'd just check the paper to see what horror films were on. I'd press record and just close the cabinet so no one knew it was recording. And then I'd just get up at 6 o'clock in the morning before anyone was up and just sit and watch whatever I'd taped on like BBC Two's kind of horror marathon or whatever, which was a big mistake because I started doing it during like Cronenberg season. So like some of my first like foray into horror was like Shivers, Rabid, The Brood, Videodrome, and I was like, so really like messed up stuff.
Yeah.
So that really like forged my like taste early on. But yeah, and then I spent my like teen years just being obsessed with Halloween and Michael Myers and trying to. I mean, back then you couldn't just go and find a film, like it just didn't work like that. So I spent years like just checking secondhand shops, and every so often you'd find Halloween 4 on VHS or, Halloween. For a long until I was about 17, I didn't even know Halloween 5 existed, because they stopped numbering them at number 6. So like I thought number 6 was number 5 because it just in the pre-internet age it was just anyway. So but stuff like that just really kind of like piqued my interest in horror directly, like and just kind of forged my writing style and my taste and stuff like that. And it just and it's just a thing I've always loved. I think up and I always felt like you could, whenever you watched a horror film, you would have a good, like, I always thought, like, you couldn't lose with a horror film. So when I went to the video shop, that's always what I rented, because even if it was terrible, you'd still have fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I think horror just always it just ended up kind of being in my blood, really. And then like when I came to do my own stuff, that was instinctively what I moved towards.
Nice. I can totally see that, actually, the Myers connection, because you very often have really unique kind of killers at the heart of the story with a sort of like identity. Do you think that's very Myers influence, or does it come from other places?
Yeah, well, I think the idea with the kind of Mycho universe generally, because Slasherhouse technically was the first thing we did, but I guess the idea was I always loved slasher movies. Like slasher movies is a really good example of what I'm talking about. When I like, if I'm not sure what to spend my money on, I know for a fact a slasher movie is going to tick all the boxes because there's like a serial killer with some kind of costume, some kind of interesting weapon, some kind of story, and they're picking off people one by one. And that's basically all I need for a movie. And so the idea with the kind of Mycho universe was just to kind of take that foundation and then go, like, so what other interesting stories could I tell using that as like a base, as a foundation, and go, because like my one problem, the reason I love slasher movies is also my one problem with them is that they're all the same. Like majoritively, there are some that break the mold, but generally slasher movies are all the kind, especially into the late 90s, every slasher movie was like basically the same setup. Even Scream was like the same setup, but just self-aware, So it was, so I just thought, what interesting stuff could you do um, with that? I was a big fan of Kevin Smith movies at the time as well, so I kind of started to really like the idea that like what if like Michael Myers and like Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger and the Amityville house and like Jaws, like they were all like in the same worlds. Like, so you could be getting chased by Michael Myers and you go to like a house and knock on the door, and then it's the Amityville house, and you go, oh no. But obviously, I didn't have rights to any of that stuff, so I was like, okay, well, like I'll just make up my own things, and like, and that was kind of how it all kind of came around.
That's really cool. Like, so do you have, I don't know how to ask this question succinctly, concisely enough. Do you have multiple stories? Like when you're thinking of writing one story, do you have other ones that you're trying to get not involved in, but do you have like side stories that go along with that you can kind of go back and fill in?
Yeah, I mean, what I try to do, like Stanley always used to say, every comic book is someone's first comic book, so you've got to write it like that. And so I write every movie as if like it's the first film, that someone would see. And that's really helpful in terms of one, storytelling, because you don't kind of get bogged down into like, like to like Phantasm 4, where you need like 40 minutes of like previously on Phantasm before you get to the story, so like it's trying to kind of write films where if you've seen the other stuff, you kind of go, oh right, that's that stuff and that stuff, but at the same time I try to write it as a fresh, each one is a fresh movie, but at the same time I do try to kind of pepper in ideas and things like that if you're paying attention, because I think the idea was initially just to make a load of movies that were all their own thing. But if you were paying attention, you go, hang on, that's a guy from that other film that I rented like the other week, and that was just the idea of it. And originally, it wasn't even called the Mycho universe. It was called like the Bottom Shelf universe, and the whole idea was that we were going to make these things on the cheap and try and get them on like Blockbuster bottom shelf. So you'd have your premium stuff, then your kind of mid-budget stuff, and then your cheap crap at the bottom. Like there were like three rentals for a tenner. And the idea was to start sneaking this universe in there. Like this was kind of like in the late 2000s, before Blockbuster decided to shut down. But yeah, the idea was that like, you could watch a Thorn movie and like maybe Nathan from Hollywood would show up and you'd go, oh, hang on, that's literally the character from that. It's not even the same. It's not the same actor. It's literally the character from that, And if you were paying attention, you'd get something a little bit more out of it. But I was always conscious that, like, Phantasm 4 again, good example. Like, I came into the Phantasm series in like 2004. I'd never seen any of the other films, and so I was like, I have no idea what's going on here at all. Like, and so I was like, okay, well, I probably need to go and figure it. But I was conscious that I didn't want to write movies that it was hard to like it was hard to access them. I wanted each one to kind of be accessible on its own terms, and I feel like that makes for better films as well, generally.
I think you're right. And out of curiosity, because you have so many characters and they are really unique and well thought out, do you go through having favorites?
Oh yeah. I think, well, Thorn's always been my favorite and he was my initial idea. Like he wasn't even in the Mycho universe when I started. He was just like a character I made up for a movie. I wanted to do my own kind of like Halloween, Friday the 13th kind of thing. And I was juggling the idea of like doing a fan film or something like that. And I was like, that's a lot of work to like, be very limited on who can see it. This is before YouTube or anything. So I was like, where can you even put? Eventually I just thought, just do your own thing. And then when I was doing Slasherhouse, Dawn kind of replaced another character that I combined into two characters that I combined into one. Like, who can I put in this Dawn? And And for a long time, I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to make a film without Thorne, like, because like the Slasherhouse and Legacy of Thorne were the first two I did, and I really leaned heavily into how cool I thought he was. And then I was like, can I get away with doing a movie without Thorne in it? So that was like a big leap for me. And yeah, like I think the next one we did was Cleaver, and that was way less popular because it didn't have Thorne involved in it. So that took me like that. We did that on a very, very small budget because we raised very little because people were like, we're not that interested in that. We want more Thorne, and I was like, well, I kind of want to expand on this other stuff. But yeah, I think what's also weird is that you kind of end up with favorites where you least expect them. I think so. Like Jacob from Pandemonium was like he was written into Slasherhouse 2 was just like a joke. Like I needed like just like what's a bog standard serial killer that she can fight at the beginning? So then you go, oh, so she fights serial killers, right? Okay, like so we've got the gist. So I came up with him, and eventually, at first he looked like a kind of like Miami Vice guy with like a theater mask and stuff, but I wasn't very keen on it, so I kind of kept iterating the design until I was like, okay, he's like a guy in a suit with like a panda mask. I like that. That's good. So, and then we found this mask made by Ghoulish Productions in Mexico, that was like almost exactly the mask that I'd designed, and I was like, spooky. And so we cast a Japanese actor to play him, and the idea was that he'd just speak his native language, and then because the character's like half Japanese, half Chinese. So the idea was that he'd speak his native language and we'd just do it over. And then the guy just didn't turn up on the day. And we were like, oh. So we shot up to the point where that character was introduced. And then just basically kind of panicked and tried to, and then luckily we had a friend who was an actor from Dave Chu from Manchester, who we'd known for years, and we just hadn't seen him in like probably about a decade. And my wife just messaged him and said, Dave, you don't want to be in a film, do you? And he was like, yeah, all right. And that was it. Like, so again, I thought, well, what we'll probably have to do is get him in. He can just say the lines kind of, and then we'll dub them over afterwards or whatever. And he just turned up. And within the first line in his delivery, I was like, oh, this guy's getting his own movie. Like, it was just perfect. And it just suddenly, this character just came alive in front of me. Like, all the pieces were there, the script, the design and everything. But it didn't feel special until Dave kind of brought his own thing to it, and I was like, okay, like, yeah, this guy's definitely got to have his own film. And so then he became like one of my favorites, like out of the blue, and it was just like I say, he was like a one-note character that. But the same happened with Cleaver. I wrote like the most cliched thing I could think of, which was like, like Killer Clown, like with a meat cleaver. There we go. Stupid thing. And then everyone was like, oh, when's Cleaver getting his own film? And then like, and then we ended up doing a sequel to that, like, and now we're working on like the third part, and it's just nuts. Like, and he's become now, since we did the first film, a really kind of a huge staple in what we do. And again, just absolute, like, just a nonsense throwaway character that I think it helped that when they finally released Slasherhouse, they shoved him on the cover. And so everyone was like, well, we want to see the movie that this looks like it's going to be. So yeah, we ended up having to kind of do that to appease a bunch of crazy clown fans.
That's my next Slasherhouse is my next dive into. I was actually, before you had jumped on, Lauren and I were talking, and she was telling me, unfortunately, with the UK and the US, like, while we have a lot of the same streaming sites, we don't have a lot of the same movies that are on those streaming sites. So she gave me a couple places to look for the Slasherhouse. But my first dive into the Mycho universe was Pandemonium. So like that was my first go into it, and then Legacy of Thorn. And then I was like, Thorn was like the one that I was like, this is it did you saying that it kind of goes back to just the slasher movies and just the Mike Myers. And I mean, I grew up on the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Street, the Halloween. So like I was like, I like this guy. Like he's just there's multiple movies to watch with this. This is going to be great. So it's Slasherhouse. She was telling me a little bit beforehand that where to find it. So that's my next jump for sure.
That should be. Out of curiosity, if we hadn't, say, introduced anyone to it, they wanted to jump into the Mychoverse for the first time, what's your gut instinct as the first one to recommend?
Well, I always think that you should introduce people to your latest movie, because that hopefully is your best movie. Is the dream, isn't it? So it's Pandemonium, I think, is a good place to start. Although it's like a comedy, more so than a lot of my other stuff. But my wife always encourages me to write more comedy, because I like writing spooky stuff and drama, and she's like, "Oh, but you're so good at writing comedy," So Pandemonium was kind of like a bit more of a foray into that. But I really enjoy doing that. It's a different experience watching it. But also, I think of our movies that have had like a wide release so far, that's probably the best made one, because obviously it was the one we made most recently. So it looks the nicest, and it's the most professionally done. And I wasn't shooting on like a £300 camera with an £11 like lens taped to the front of it. So it was the first time I had like some proper film equipment to go make something. So it looks quite nice. And I think generally as a story, it's probably the tightest one I'd written up to that point. So yeah, I think that's a good place to jump in. See, the Temptations always say, just start at the beginning with Slasherhouse, but that's like, I made that in like 2009, 2010. Like, I think it was like the first film shot in like a consumer DSLR, like ever.
Wow.
So like, it's a dated looking film, and also like our cinematographer like dropped out the project 3 weeks before, so we had like 5 days prep, and I had to also teach myself how to use how to use a camera and lenses for the first time, because up until that point I'd used kind of video centric cameras. So I didn't know anything about focal lengths. I didn't know anything about like aperture, any of that stuff. I'd been used to using like TV cameras, video centric cameras to do everything up to that point. And so we had like 5 days for me to also learn how to use like a traditional kind of filmmaking style camera. But then that got a load of like praise for how it looked. So I was like, oh, maybe I'm not that bad at it. And so I just ended up doing it ever since. So the temptation is to kind of say to people, start with Slasherhouse, but I don't know if that's a good idea. Chronologically, I think Mask of Thorn is probably the first one, the one that starts up. Yeah, the one that starts earliest until Wrath of Thorn comes out. So yeah, Mask of Thorn, and generally Mask of Thorn, I think, is like the kind of film that I want to make, where it's like, it's slashery and there's like some good kills in it, and it's like colorful, and the story's pretty good, and like the script's not like over, it's quite a tight script, and like there's a bunch of jokes and stuff in it, and it's good. To me, I think it's a good balance of all the stuff that I like doing. It's not like Pandemonium, where it's just like everything's a joke. It's not like Holloway or Molly Bannister, where it's just like serious like drama all the way through or whatever. It's just it's a good mix of like jokes and slashes and gore and like characters and just stuff I like to put in movies.
How important do you find the kills to be? Like you said, like some good kills, and Lauren and I will always talk about this. Like what are some good like movies when they have like really good kills? Like we'll definitely bring them up and talk about them. But how important is that when you're writing it to you put emphasis on that?
I think I always aim, you always aim for like to have like one that's like that'll make people remember it. You know what I mean? Trying to think like so I always like aim to have like one that I put like all my that kind of effort into. Because I mean the problem with low budget stuff is that like you come up with like some really cool like kills and stuff, and then you're like, how long have we got? You got 20 minutes to make it happen. And you're like, oh, God damn it. Like Cleaver was a great example of that. Where like I think almost everybody died from like a cleaver coming up and then chopping off camera. Like because we were just like we had like 6 days, and like I was like, how are they dying? Like Cleaver comes up this screen, dead. Let's go. And then like I had to like get people back to like film. Like we filmed like my friend getting his like guts cut out and stuff, just to kind of because I was like one, like hardly anybody dies in this, and when they do, they die off camera. So it's like, so we went back and just shot some stuff to try and just beef the gore up a little bit. But like, yeah, I think like Mask of Thorn, I spent so much time figuring out how I was going to chop Lydia's character in half, like with the sword stuck in the wall, and she gets pulled down over the top of it. And I was like, how do I do that? But also, how do I do that like with like no money?
Yeah.
Right.
And that was like, what did we use? Like, so that was like stuffing from like teddy bears and stuff that we found lying around this school that we were shooting in, and like a blow up, like stag do doll.
No way.
So we just cut her in half and then filled her back up, like, and then basically made like a latex cage and ribs, so she had like two halves. And then she had to do the scene where she gets pinned up, and then take her whole costume off. We had to put it on this doll, and then cut the whole thing in half, and then kind of lightly put it back together so it could get pulled down onto this. Oh, what a nightmare! And this was like 4 o'clock in the morning as the sun's coming up and starting to spill into the hallway. And I was like, oh, we're just not going to make it. But we did. But that was, yeah, so like, but that was the one I put all the thought and effort into. Like, that this is going to be the one everyone remembers where she gets cut in half. Although on Slasherhouse 2, there's the girl in the graveyard going down on her boyfriend, and she gets her head chopped off, and his Willie goes along with it. Like, and so like that was like the one where I'm like, this is got to be really good. Like all the rest of the kills in it can be a bit of fucking crap, but like that one's got I mean, it's fine for the time I made it, I think. As time went on, I think like the big thing for me was I go, right, so someone's going to get killed like this, and then like I always try to add like an extra step onto it, like because the temptation is someone gets their guts cut out, done. What's the next thing? Like they get their guts cut out and then strangled with them, like just something a bit. And I find that has always served me really well, is just to kind of go, so like come up with a creative kill and then something on top of it. But also I think over the years, it's a big one for me, is that I've always been very like I've always hate the idea of digital effects. But like the more time's gone on, the more I've been like, it's more about the idea than the presentation. And I think Slasherhouse 3, there's a bit where like a cheerleader gets like her face punched out, like through the back of her head. And there was just no way we could have done this practically well, for the money we had. I mean, if we have, like, this is the thing. If I had thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds to spend on makeup effects and stuff, I'd just get someone really good in to come and do all this stuff practically. That's obviously the bottom line of what I'd like to do. But I also try not to shy away from digital stuff for like a bunch of reasons. Sometimes it's much safer. You can do more creative stuff sometimes with it. But quite often it's a combination of both things, really. Like, I try to kind of have something practical there, and then we just expand on it with some digital stuff, or yeah, just really, really depends. on what the effect is. But yeah, I think I try, like I say, I try to lean into you know, the the idea of like what you do, the idea of what you're doing is more important than how you do it, I think. And that's again served me quite well, I think. Also, like stuff's getting really good now at like at really being able to sell digital stuff. That sometimes you wouldn't know, and sometimes you definitely would. Like, it's but sometimes you just get so surprised at like, oh wow, that looks like you wouldn't be able to tell that we did that digitally, or and like so that's fun. Trying to figure out how you can kind of cheat that and stuff as well.
Right.
I know that you've hinted at this, but you've had to like learn quite a lot on spec on the way. And at this point, you've probably done every single aspect of making a film. Was there one thing that you remember a moment where you're like, I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to handle this, and it turned out great?
I don't know. I mean, I've always hated sound. Well, I started off with like professional sound people, and they did a terrible job. And like eventually, I was like, well, I know I can do as good of a job at least, not of all sound people, but of the people I'd used. And so that was like a big one for me. Like learning sound stuff, because that's not natural. That doesn't come naturally to me at all. I don't know. I think building props and stuff, like, because starting out, a lot of people, I used to have to get people in to do that. Like just even really simple stuff like makeup and things like that. I would have to get people in to come and do kind of very basic things. And over the years, I've just kind of like forced like that stuff into my eyeballs and my ears and stuff, like where I was like, okay, like, well, no one's going to do this, but I can't afford to pay someone to do this properly. How do I do it? Like, and so I started to learn how to kind of build things and put lights into things and like do like I think the big one this time round was that I built like a mech suit for one of our characters. And I remember writing it in the script and thinking, someone's gonna have to build that for me. There's no way. And then 3 weeks before we started shooting this summer, I was just like there with piles of polystyrene and like tubing and all sorts of stuff and going, okay, like, how am I doing this? Like, and it happened, and like it worked. I was amazed, but like 3 weeks before film. So I thought I had about 3 weeks to build this mech suit, and then I'm going through the script and just checking off all my props and stuff, and I just see giant stone throne, and I'm like, what? Like, how did I forget about that? Like, and so, like, whilst building this, so I'm like, basically, every morning I was trying to build this mech suit, letting all like the glues and paints and stuff dry on that, and then going over and working on this throne that I was making out of like expanding foam and patio chairs and like, but also like, I was like, it's huge. Like, how's it going to fit into like a car to take it anywhere? So I had to build it in like two pieces that could then go together. My goodness, like, just, and I'd never done. I'd used like expanding foam to like hold like some weapon stuff together before and things, like, rather than using glue. I thinking, okay, the foam will probably fill it out more and give a more rigid hull. So I'd used it for like basic things like that, but I'd never built anything from it before. So yeah, I ended up like using this again, sat down and just like on YouTube, and I watched a guy make one out of like cans, like a chair out of cans. And I was like, okay, so it's like the same principle, right? Like, and so yeah, and then I just so I spent 3 weeks building a throne and a and a mech suit at the same time, which I wouldn't ever advise anybody try and do, because they're two completely different skill sets that you're like flitting between. And then also I was doing storyboards, like using like storyboarding software at this, so I'm like jumping from like plumbing, piping, and screwing stuff together to like sculpting foam to like CG, trying to figure out how to move CG models around, and I'm just like, please kill me, like like. But now the problem is now I go, okay, I built a mech suit last time, so like, what's the next thing? What's the next big thing I do, and how much less time can I do that in?
It's ambitious.
Yeah. I don't know how you, I mean, you started doing this because you wanted to make movies. You saw a guy, making a movie with a camcorder in the woods, and now you're sculpting things and teaching yourself how to do it, or just the stress that comes along with this has got to be overwhelming at times.
Oh yeah, like there are days when I go, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? Like, because I mean, I don't know how much you know about indie film, but it doesn't pay very well. If at all, it costs me money more than anything. And then on top of that, yeah, like sometimes I'm so stressed I can't see properly. I'm like, like I can't think like in a linear fashion where I'm like, what have I got to do next? Too many things, so I can't pick any of them. Like, and some days you kind of sit there and go, what am I doing? Like you've just spent 20 minutes holding like a Nerf gun to some piece of plastic, waiting for the glue to dry, and then you take your hand off and it just falls apart, and you go, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this to myself? Why is this my life? I don't know, but I still don't know the answer, to be quite honest. I think I'm addicted to like the thought of like, next time I'll know better though.
Is that the thing? Is it for you? Is it the satisfaction, like when the film gets done, or is it showing it to people, or is it when you're ready to do the next one, which is like the really great moment?
Yeah, it's hard to figure out because people never tell you they like your films. That's like a big one. Oh, like yeah, it's like a huge one, indie films. Like, but people just don't. People watch a film they like and they go, "That was good. I'll get on with my life." But people who hate films will go out of their way to fucking let you know.
That's true.
So I tend to hear what's wrong with them more than what's right with them. But that I don't think. Again, I've come to terms with that doesn't particularly matter. Because art is its own thing. So sometimes you do that for. I think, yeah, mainly I kind of I do it for the sake of it. I think a little bit. To like, yeah, I think I'm addicted to the idea of everything went wrong, but I know for next time, right? Like, right? The worst part is eventually you start forgetting stuff that you used to get right because you've got it wrong in the first place. Then you're like, oh yeah, that's a thing that I have to watch out for. Like, oh God, like and it's stupid stuff like forgetting that your camera has a dual ISO, so you're like pushing your sensitivity on your sensor up and going, it's just getting grainier and grainier. But if you just push it a little bit further, it'll jump to its next thing. But you forget that because you learned that 5 films ago, and then that's been a bit, geez, like, and it's just tiny little stupid things like that. We're like, why can't I get a good image out of this? Oh, right, yeah, because I'm an idiot who forgot something. Like, so there's, but yeah, I think I'm addicted to kind of, at this point, just like, well, my next one will be like really, really good though, but I think, I mean, like we have like a very small, very minute, but like appreciative fan base, and they really do tell us what they like, and that's all that matters to me, really. is that like there's generally about 3 people I make these films for that like over the years have kind of just become like fans of our stuff, and so I just kind of go, as long as they're happy with what I'm making, I guess I don't really care outside of that. Um, I mean, the idea is, I guess, hopefully that we appeal to a larger audience than 3 people, but I mean, that's my core, and they're all like people who have like very similar tastes to me. So I'm like, it's like a good litmus test as well for like kind of going like, one of them's like a guy who used to work in the pub where I wrote the original Slasherhouse, um, and he's just been a fan of our stuff ever since. And he used to tell me all the films he'd like, and I'd be like, oh, cool, yeah, like there's a lot of that in this, you know. Oh, he's a big fan of full moon movies, and I was like, oh, buddy, you're gonna love this.
You wait.
You know, and so like now, like he's like a really good kind of like, yeah, like a kind of good test audience for me. If he's happy, I'm happy. You know, like and so yeah, we cast after him and his wife in Cleaver, I think.
Aww.
You know, just because he'd always been very supportive, like from the very beginning, and so it was, yeah, it's a nice little kind of, you know,
Yeah, that's lovely.
you remember when people are nice, you know. So it's yeah, it was a nice thing. I've forgotten what the question was. Oh, why do I keep doing it? I don't know.
That's great. No,
I'm stupid. Because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Well,
But
on
like
it,
there are parts. There are parts that I like. The problem is the part I like is the part just before you start making making the film, where like its true like potential is still possible. Because then from that the second you start, it's just a series of items that you've forgotten, or things that aren't working that you have to compromise on until it's just more important that it's done than it's perfect, you know. And so yeah, like that's it. I like writing the music. That's because I don't have to worry about anybody else. I just sit. I've got my little keyboard here that plugs into my rig, and I just sit and write music, you know, kind of peacefully. No, no one to cause me problems or anything. And I like that. I like that bit. But like, yeah, sometimes when you're editing it, it kind of comes together a little bit. You're like, oh yeah, that was quite nice actually. Quite like that. There are little bits that I enjoy. The mech suit because I'd basically put it on him and then sent him off into a dark corner, and then I said an action, and he came out and he was like adding all the movement to it and everything that I hadn't asked him to do, and I was like, oh, all right, like it looked a bit ropey until right now, and I was like, okay, like I'm pretty chuffed with myself right now. Like, you know, like, and it's like little moments like that where you kind of go, all right, it was worth the 3 weeks of like stress for this moment. It's literally like in the film for about 16 seconds. Like, I mean, this is the thing. You know, it's yeah, it's the same as the original Slasherhouse. There's like a box that's got Thorne's mask in it that like comes down from the ceiling. It's in the film for about 10 seconds. It took the guy who made it like 3 weeks of like making like pulleys and change so that this thing stopped and opened up, and like building all these, you know, mechanics into it. It took him 3 weeks to make it. It's in the film for 10 seconds. Like, but it was important. That's the one you want to get right, you know? So
when you rewatch your movies, do you just do you get like headaches, like certain things like, oh man, that was a pain in the butt to do? Or are you able to enjoy the story?
I try, to be honest, when I usually see the film for the first time is at the premiere in January. So I edit the whole film theoretically as in pieces. All the pieces go together, you know, theoretically. So I put it all together, make sure all the pieces flow into each other. And then I kind of just put it out, send it over to the festival, and then the first time I see it is with an audience. So theoretically, like I say, it all works and is all there and is the film that I made. The problem is that by the time you're at the point where you're like putting it all together and exporting it, you're like, I mean, does it really matter if it works or not? Because this is the fucking film I've made. Like, you know, like what are you gonna do about it if it doesn't? Like make it again? You know, like so but that's quite freeing, I think, because I kind of get to see it for the first time properly with an audience. And so you kind of get a good idea of how it's landed sometimes. Depending on the audience, I guess, really. So yeah, it's a tough one. Slasherhouse 3 was its premiere was on like a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. A lot of people
like
showed
everyone
up.
had waited around. What?
A lot of people came though. It was packed.
Yeah, I think the problem was though that everyone had waited around for the film. Like, so the second it finished, they were like, right, I've got to go. And like you missed out on like any of like the feedback or anything. Also, the festival kind of my fault completely, but they mistimed. We sent them a rough cut and they mistimed the running time for it because there was about 25% of the film missing. So the film started to overrun. So like during the last half hour, there was like people coming through and going like, "Oh, is it still going?" Because they were waiting for the next film, and I could hear like the guys running the projector going, "Is it still going?" Like and like so that started like happening all around me, and I was like, "Oh man!" Like, and so the last half hour, I just could not concentrate on anything at all because it felt like the film had really outstayed its welcome a little bit. And then afterwards, everyone was like, I really enjoyed it, gotta go. And I was like, and then the festival kind of came down from there, really. Like, you know, a lot of people left straight after our film. And so, like, there wasn't really anybody to, you know, converse or anything about how it had landed. And so I was kind of like, oh, that's a bit of a bummer. And so, like, I thought, look, maybe it's a misfire because all the way through editing it, I had kind of been like, I just don't know if this is any good. Like, I've been working on it for so long now. Like, because we were about 3 days away from starting to shoot it when a pandemic happened. And then so I'd spent like 4 years kind of trying to get it in production, being cancelled, trying to get it back into production, being cancelled. We'd lost like half of our main cast because like a lot of people stopped acting during the pandemic and stuff, like did other things. Or went on to like just kind of like become more famous than doing our little movie and stuff like that. So it's like, so we kind of lost like our initial cast. Like before I know, we kind of like cast in the last minute a lot of the roles. So the film was just constantly changing so much from its original thing that by the end of it, I was like, I just don't even know if this is any good. And then the first screening, I thought maybe not. Like it had to happen at some point. Like, you know, but then it screened at Romford and it just landed so differently. Like it was just like everyone was really excited in it and around it, and like people sat through the end credits waiting for like the little things that I'd put in, and like, you know, like, and then we did like a podcast afterwards, and like people were asking us about all different characters, and I was just like, whoa, like I can't believe it. Like, and then we started getting reviews in, like, oh, it's great, it's fantastic, you know, from people who not connected to us in any way, who just come to the festival to see it, to review it for like the website they write for or something. And I was like, oh, maybe it is content. I have no idea. Like, so yeah, it's a tough one, really. I don't. What was the question again?
No, you're good. I love, this is one of the things we love is getting to chat about stuff. I hope you don't mind. You flashed your keyboard earlier, and Chris found something in his research, and
Yes,
I'm kind of curious for him to ask this question, if you don't mind.
I might have written this down wrong, but it also it's on the internet, so I thought to ask: were you a vocalist in like a rock band or in Subject 7?
Oh, come on!
Oh no, is this not supposed to be brought up?
Well, no, it's just like yeah. So I was in a band for a while called Hockey Mask Heroes, and we kind of wrote songs about horror movies. It was pretty cool, but like it was kind of like, you know, like a kind of hobbyist band, really. Well, our most famous song was a song called Phantasm, based on Phantasm. I think it should be on the Mycho Records Bandcamp page. I did a re-recording of it a few years ago, kind of like as an anniversary thing. And really as like a goodbye to that project. Because me and the guitarist kind of carried on recording like studio stuff with that for years, and then it kind of became the moniker in which I was recording soundtracks under and stuff like that. But obviously every so often you go, why are we getting like a load of like a flood of like likes and interest on our page? And I was like, oh, it's because I put a new soundtrack out or whatever. And I thought that's not really fair to kind of keep involving this guy in like. Anyway, so I started writing under a different thing for the movie stuff. But in the meantime, because of that, I kind of got asked to put together like I guess what would be called like a super group at the time in the kind of Preston Northwest music scene, and that was a band called Subject 7. And like, yeah, like we weren't like, you know, like famous, but we were popular. We did about 150, 200 shows in like 2 years.
Wow.
Traveled all around the country, kind of like sometimes played to like bar staff, sometimes played to like thousands of people. You know, it was like, yeah, it was really good. We did like a bunch of music videos and stuff, which you should not look up. And, but yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was like the closest I've ever got to like musically writing the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. Yeah, it was fun, and then yeah, and then the drummer cheated on his girlfriend, and the band kind of fell to pieces. You know, and that was a big blow for me because I'd spent like 3.5 years kind of writing like some amazing music and stuff, and like but we kind of separated the rights out between all of us. So those songs kind of can't really be played by any one person. So I was like, oh, that's a big bummer. Because all this stuff that I kind of put my heart and soul into, like now just was gone. So like the idea was we thought about maybe kind of continuing the band from a fresh start. But eventually I started doing Hockey Mask Heroes stuff again, like in the studio. And then I always had a joke that one day I was gonna have a band called Dixon with 2 X's. And the X's would be lightning bolts. You know, and it was just like a stupid joke that I used to say all the time. And then I was like, oh, I might do that, and so I did, and that's what I've been writing under ever since. And then some t-shirt flannel shirt company last year came out with the same bloody name with the 2 X's, and I was like, oh,
No.
unbelievable. Well, they make really nice shirts, so I'm like, can I have a free shirt then, please?
Yeah.
Like, you know. But yeah, no, I think it's just one of those weird kind of coincidences, I think. But yeah, so I've been writing under that since. Just doing kind of soundtrack stuff. I've been writing an album for about 3 years, but whether it ever comes out or not. What usually happens is I pick one of the tracks to like use as an instrumental on the end of the Horoscopes movies, like
cool.
every so often, because I'm like still working, so I just go, what have I got that I haven't put out yet? And I go, oh, that's quite nice. I'll use that on the credits for Horoscopes 2 or whatever. Yeah. And outside of that, I just tend to write the soundtracks for our movies and stuff at the minute. Yeah, it was a good time. You know, the music industry is not a particularly nice place to work. Like either, like it's everyone's out to basically rip you off as a performer. Like if you think like being a movie maker and festivals ripping you off, like being a musician, like it's like that on like a almost like tri-weekly basis, you know, 3 times a week. People are expecting you to sell X amount of tickets to a thing. They're rinsing all that money. You don't even get a cut of that until you've sold X amount. You know, it's just an awful industry to try and make money in. And I just wasn't enjoying it. And like, not enough to kind of start up a new touring band. So, and like these days, who fucking tours anymore? You just record your stuff and put it on TikTok, didn't you? And that's do a little dance.
Yes, the
There you go.
moves.
There we go.
That actually leads me into a question I do have for you, and I know we're getting close to the end here, but was curious. You had mentioned that when you were making movies, you were trying to go kind of something for like the bottom shelf, right? And I remember Blockbuster and like the video rental places, and then we mentioned it again with the music and how everything's just streaming now. Anyways, do you miss like the physical, like you have to go to the store and rent the movie, or do you like the fact that you can go on to Netflix, a Tubi, an Amazon and get anything you want?
I'm a bit of a mixture, I think. Like because obviously, one, I'm like forever looking for like weird, obscure stuff, like that like you just can't buy, like like Night of the Dribbler, the basketball themed slasher movie, or like
Oh my God.
I found of all places, I found a VHS rip that someone put on YouTube. Like
Nice.
of all the places I could have found it, I was like, so it's great for that. But I also do like, I have like a huge physical media collection as well. I buy less stuff now, mainly because like a lot of stuff is kind of like I don't even find out about it till it comes on Amazon, and then it's either not even available physically or like I have to like jump through a lot of hoops to be able to get hold of a lot of this stuff. I still collect like all the big franchises, like and small franchises, like so if like there's a Halloween film out, or like a Puppet Master, or Children of the Corn, or a Hellraiser, or like anything like that, like Child's Play, anything that's like one of the big franchises, I'd go out of my way to find copies of that. I waited like 5 years to get a copy of Hellraiser Revelation, like that I could play on like a UK DVD player, well, Blu-ray player. They didn't release it on DVD. Yeah, like that didn't even get a physical release in this country, like for ages. But the second it did, I pre-ordered it. It's like so, like like a lot of my favorite films, or if they do like a reissue of like something really classic, I'll pick that up. If people I know, like people in the community have like a physical release, especially if it's like in the shops or something, I go and pick that up straight away, because that stuff really matters. That's where people take note, like distributors and things like that. So, I do try to pick that stuff up wherever I can on like day one. So like like a lot of my collection is basically like UK indie horror, like a big pile of it. That just kind of people I kind of vaguely know have made, or but yeah, like it's wherever you can see a film, really. Like I don't think it really matters that much. I go to the cinema like once a week, like, so I'm a big fan of the theatrical experience as well. Like so my taste is very eclectic. Like I love like big budget like schlock, and at the same time, like I really like kind of like low budget shot on nothing, like slasher movies about Founders Day, or like or Thanksgiving, or what, something like that, or like the Labor Day slasher, or whatever stuff like that that's shot on like some guys are shot on their camcorder, like at their high school corridor, or in the high school corridors, or whatever. Like I have my taste kind of so it's wherever I can see whatever I want to see, I guess. But I think I always offer physical media because people like that. I like that. So I try to offer that. But it costs me. I think it costs me as much to sell a DVD as that I charge for it. But it's about it being available to people who want to watch their films like that. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, like we've probably made more money off streaming than we've made off anything else because it's more accessible to people, you know. So yeah, it's a difficult one really, but I don't. I mean, for me personally, I really miss the video shop. Like I used to go every Monday. I'd go to the video shop, and I'd try and pick something from the top shelf, something from the middle shelf, something from the bottom shelf, you know, every week to try and kind of um, keep all those fires stoked. I mean, that's how I discovered people like Pat Higgins and stuff. Just you know, like renting movies. I was like, this looks terrible. I'll grab it. And then like you know, I loved it, and you know, I went on my way to let Pat know. You know, like so it's kind of yeah. I think wherever you can see it, but yeah, I do miss the physical. I mean, I like I still a couple of times a week I go to HMV and CEX and see if there's anything worth putting in my collection. I have like at the minute for just pure ease, like a tiny little portable DVD player that I can just charge up and take anywhere with me, and I can just sit and watch DVDs. And but that's encouraged me just to buy more DVDs. Like again, you know, it used to be like every lunchtime I'd go meet my wife for coffee before she was my wife, before she was my girlfriend usually. And then on the way home, I'd just go to like Cash Converter or whatever and look through their DVD, and I'd probably buy like 4 or 5 DVDs every single day. Like, you know, so my collection just is out of control. Like, you know, so yeah, like I think wherever you can see it. But I will say that like buying stuff from filmmakers is like a really good way to kind of keep directly from them, is a good way to keep them supported. Because I think on Amazon I earn like 1.03 pence per stream, and like at least like with a DVD I earn about £2.30, maybe $2.30, whatever that is in pounds. It's like £1.18 or something, you know. Well, that's £1.18.
Hey, yeah.
Hey.
And I'm aware that we kept you a little over an hour, but I wanted to make sure we got a chance to properly talk about Wrath of Thorn, because you've alluded to all the work you've done over the summer, and I was hoping you'd give a chance for our listeners, tell them a bit about what it's about and where they can see it when it comes out.
Okay, yeah. So Wrath of Thorn is the third and final part in the Thorn trilogy that we officially started in 2012. There was a short in 2009 that we did that was based on the first film, Legacy of Thorn. Yeah, so this is the third and final part. It kind of answers a bunch of questions. These are always annoying movies for me to write because like I can't be kind of vague about anything anymore. I've kind of got to say definitively like why something or what something is. Well, yeah, I mean, we shot it over the summer. This summer, did like a 10-day, which is quite short for us. 10-day kind of principal photography with the main cast, and then we did like 2 or 3 days of pickups, I think, with Eve and Lewis and Sean and Maria Lee Metheringham from the previous movie. Yeah, and it's just like it's kind of like a post-apocalyptic slasher / kind of satanic panic movie that's got like kind of like a military element to it, and like it's really hard to describe, to be quite honest. It's kind of like Dog Soldiers meets Godzilla, I guess.
Ooh, that's a cool description.
Like that's like the two tones are kind of like not like kind of like Showa era Godzilla, you know, like kind of more modern era Godzilla, where everyone's like, oh shit, like Godzilla's horrible, like run, like really though, you know. So it's like yeah, it was because I feel like as well like Thorn had kind of become like a little bit kind of like walks into a room and just smashes your head up and that, and so I kind of wanted to just kind of make him a little bit kind of menacing again, a little bit scary. If I could, you know, yeah, and it was good fun, stressful, you know, because every day it's the first. I think it's the first time we've made a film in like daylight ever. Like most of our yeah, over the last kind of 20 years, I've probably done about 4 or 5 scenes in daylight. But this is like half the film was set like in the middle of like the day, and like so like some days we had like scorching sun, some days it was cloudy, some days it was raining. Like yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we seemed to pick like locations where like people were like, "Go park my car there, mate." And I'm like, it's right in the middle of my scene. So thanks. But yeah, we got a lot of help from one of the locations we shot Slasherhouse 2 in. They really came in and said the big problem we had really was that a lot of the cast kind of that we've had locked in for years dropped out, you know, because obviously we set this up kind of during the pandemic, or well, just before the pandemic. So a lot of people kind of moved on to other stuff. One of our main cast dropped out like 2 weeks before we started, and so I had to bring in my friend Lewis, who really was not happy about because the costume is like a very uncomfortable 15-kilogram muscle suit, you know, and so he was not happy about it, and I can understand why. You know, because it's basically like torture. So instead of someone else having to do that and him just doing like little bits of stuff like he'd planned to, he then had to wear this horrible suit for, you know, 4 days, which wasn't nice. But lemons out of lemonade, or lemonade out of lemons, we did replace our lead with a girl called Sophie Ash, and like, oh yeah, she was like amazing. She's one of like the nicest people I've ever met, and like one of the best actors I've ever met. Like, and she just slotted right into like, you know, because it's another weird thing is kind of like suddenly having to recast your lead like 3 weeks before shooting, when everybody else is like someone you've been friends with for 10 years, is like, you know, if they don't fit in, there's going to be a big problem. But she did. And also Mia, who is a friend of ours' daughter, who was 6 when she did the film, was there for 10 days. And I haven't worked with kids extensively like that for a long time, since the first Cleaver, I don't think. And I've never worked with a kid this young. And she was great. She was more professional most of the adults, really. Yeah, so like a lot. Anyway, I'm supposed to be promoting the film, not telling you all about who was in it. But yeah, no, it's kind of like a nice goodbye to like that series of like that portion of the Mycho universe. Some of it crossed over into Slasherhouse 3, and so it does kind of. If you've seen that, great. You'll have a little bit more of an insight into it, but it is its own thing as well. And it's just kind of a bit of a goodbye to like some of those characters from that area, the Thorn portion of the Mycho stuff, and it also kind of brings like a bunch of characters from the 2 different films, which are set in 2 different time periods, kind of brings them all together, which is quite nice. And then it was a fun, interesting thing to write, like from a character perspective. So yeah, no, it hopefully you'll be able to see it in January at Horror on Say Film Festival. It's been submitted, so I don't know how, because we finished filming on the 27th and the deadline was the 30th.
Wow.
So but it happened. So yeah, so hopefully you'll be able to see it there. And yeah, you know, if you're a fan of kind of old school slasher movies, hopefully it's something different enough to kind of, but treads the same ground enough to kind of keep people interested in that kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, in January, and hopefully there'll be a trailer either the end of this month or October. Usually is when we release trailers for stuff. So
That's exciting. Excellent.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, MJ. You gave us so much of your time today and had quite a lot of fun stories. I absolutely loved this. Thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank
You're
you.
welcome anytime.
Fantastic. And thank you, of course, to our listeners. You have been listening to the amazing MJ Dixon, and this has been the London Horror Movie Club.
If you want to share your thoughts about this episode, please head to our Facebook or YouTube pages. We're grateful to Kukurbit, who made our music. Thank you for listening, and please join us next time for the London Horror Movie Club.